So, good morning and welcome again. Today is Saturday, June the 13th, 2026. This is our All Aboard Ohio statewide meeting for the month of June. Welcome. Many of you know me, but for those that don't, I'm John Esterly. I'm the executive director here at All Aboard Ohio. Very excited to be actually the presenter today. So you get to spend your morning with me. We don't have a guest this month, but we're going to be talking about something pretty fun that I've got coming up that's going to be the subject of not only today's meeting, but another meeting later in the year, and then some social media activity in between. So, without further ado, we are doing a little project. We're calling it Leave the Car at Home. So, I have a trip the last week of August from Columbus to Chicago. I'll be in Chicago for a week for a convention. And I decided that I wanted to really do my best to utilize modes of transportation that we might not normally think of. So, typically when I've gone to Chicago in the past, I have either driven if I needed my car there or if I was bringing a lot of stuff, or I would fly. There are a number of cities, Chicago being one of them, that it is incredibly convenient to get to from Columbus. We've got a number of direct flights between those two cities. So really, the convenience factor is huge when it comes to being able to fly, but wanted to explore some of those alternatives. So today is part one of this adventure. We're going to talk through the planning of the trip. I explored a number of different options and, ended up booking my trip, which we'll kind of talk about at the very end of today's presentation about which options I chose to explore. So this trip had several goals. Obviously, if it were easy or if the goal were to just get there quickly, I would be flying. So goal number one, I want to leave the car in Columbus. I think any way that I would get anywhere, I would at least have to drive from my home to, the terminal or the airport or wherever. So I think it's probably not a good goal to just walk out the door and into some form of transportation because the reality in Columbus is that would probably be some form of rideshare. So I am allowing myself the grace of being able to drive from home to wherever this trip starts, but that car will stay in Columbus. We want to utilize transit options that we might not normally think of. Um, I want to see how this trip would compare to either driving or flying, and we're going to look at a couple of different things. I've already mentioned the ease of transportation, convenience of transportation, but we're going to also look very frankly at what the cost of transportation would be. We're going to document the trip. So Ryan, who I don't think is on the call, but Ryan, our social media chair, he and I are going to work very closely together to document this trip as it goes on. We're going to provide a lot of content for our um, social media followers on all of our different platforms so that people can kind of follow along and see what the trip looks like as it's happening. And then in September, we're going to follow up with that September statewide meeting, which will be part two, and we'll discuss the trip in total. So the benchmarks that we're going to measure from, uh, the easiest, again, way to get there in terms of total time and total um, ease of transportation would be to fly. I did some pricing several weeks ago when I put everything together for this presentation and booked the trip. So these prices obviously are going to vary from week to week and even day to day, depending on the demand of the trip, how many seats are left. So, but when I booked the trip to fly from Columbus to O'Hare and back, the round trip pricing was $288. in terms of my outbound time frame. And I would say for all of these time frames, the big flag is we go from Eastern to Central time. So some of these times look pretty ridiculous. Like obviously the flight is not 30 minutes. We are flying with the time zone, so we pick up an hour, and then coming home, we would fly against the time zone, so we would kind of lose an hour in there. So just be aware that those times, as we look at all of these different trips, are going to reflect that central to eastern time zone shift. So again, it's about an hour and a half flight. So going out, I would take off Monday at 11 in the morning and land at 11:30 in Chicago, and then coming back on Friday, I would take off at 10 and land just after noon here in Columbus. Now, I probably ought to flag that this work convention is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that week. So the goal is to make sure that I'm there Monday evening. And then I would leave either late Thursday evening or Friday morning. So that was kind of the goal for all of the scheduling for these trips. The other benchmark that we would potentially have would be to drive from Columbus to Chicago. The price of this, so it's 711 miles round trip, and that would be straight there, straight back with no driving in the city or on the way, other than just, again, the straight trip there. I did look up, I drive a 2016 Jeep Cherokee with a four-cylinder engine, and the most optimistic miles per gallon that they see for that configuration is about 25. And as of today, the average price of gas is $4.15 per gallon. So we get somewhere in the neighborhood of $120. Obviously, that would be subject to pretty wild variation depending on price of gas, depending on the actual mileage that I'm able to get. And then also, if I were to drive around Chicago at all while I'm there, that's going to add to that expense. I should also note that I am sure it is not free to park in the city of Chicago. And in fact, if I were to just, take an anecdotal estimate, I would imagine I would nearly double that total cost with the cost of parking. And in fact, probably even more than that for 4 nights worth of parking. It is about 5.5 hours of total driving time. I can't imagine that I would do that straight. So I did account for about a half hour of um, stopping, eating, stretching my legs throughout the course of that trip. So again, outbound time frame, I would leave Monday morning at about 11 o'clock. I figured I would leave driving the same time I would leave flying, which would put me in Chicago at about 4. And then coming home, if I again were to return on that same timeline as flying, I would uh, leave Chicago at 10 and get back here into Columbus at about 5 p.m. So, I think when we look at those things, those would be kind of the two benchmarks that we are looking to compare to as we look at these other transit options. So, all of that to say, let's dig into what we've got so far. Um, Obviously, we are all aboard Ohio. We are primarily a passenger rail advocacy group, so I really wanted to give Amtrak an opportunity to be a part of this. So I looked at the various different ways that we can get from the state of Ohio to Chicago. We've got several um, throughout our state and beyond as a preview of coming attractions. The first one that I looked at is actually to go into Michigan and to utilize Wolverine. Wolverine, for those that don't know, goes from Detroit to Chicago. Portions of it are in excess of 100 miles an hour. So, in terms of Midwest service, we can consider this higher speed rail. It does operate on, in some cases, dedicated passenger rail trackage. A little history there. A lot of the Wolverine trackage is actually owned by the state of Michigan. So, they've been able to upgrade it and provide more consistent service than maybe some of the other Amtrak routes just because of the nature of that ownership there. They do have 3 frequencies that head west from Detroit. They leave at roughly 7, roughly 9:30, and then 5 p.m. And then all of those frequencies also have a stop in Ann Arbor, which, for those that don't know, is southwest of Detroit. So 9:51, 10:23, and 6 p.m. And the reason I flag Ann Arbor there is some of the transit options that we take a look at to get from Columbus to Chicago, Ann Arbor is actually the easier place to get to than Detroit would be. The other Amtrak service that I looked at was the Lakeshore Limited. There are two different frequencies that run through Ohio. They pass through both Cleveland and Toledo. Those are the major stops. I'm sure most of you, particularly those that live across the northern part of the state, know there are a myriad of other stops along the way in places like Bryan, in places like Elyria, even Alliance, which is probably the closest stop to Columbus that may have provided service. I'm sorry, Alliance is on the Floridian. Take that back. But again, other places that we can stop in Ohio. So as you can see, and as we all know, the times are pretty terrible for passing through. And as you'll see, as we get a little bit deeper into the explanations of these connections, some of those times can really pose a serious challenge when it comes to linking between different modes of transit and transportation. Here's a map for those that aren't familiar. And again, I'm sure we know the Lakeshore, the Floridian, the Cardinal, but I did want to show the run that the Wolverine takes for those that may not be familiar. That does run across the southern portion of Michigan, again, connecting Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Chicago. So I ran this a couple of different ways. The first would be if I wanted to use the Wolverine and experience, that higher speed rail experience as I would go across into Chicago. To get there, I would have to get from Columbus to Michigan somewhere. And I found a way that I can break that down and make that happen. The first would be to take Go Bus service from Columbus to Toledo. They have one daily frequency, which leaves at about 6 in the morning and gets to Toledo at about 10. It's fairly economical. It runs about $15 one way. So in terms of cost, it's definitely something that's very affordable. From Toledo, I would have to somehow get to Michigan. There is a transportation option that runs from Toledo to the Detroit airport. It is designed for exactly that, to provide service for folks that are flying out of Detroit. It is $34.99 regardless of time that you take it. They've got multiple frequencies every day. It runs from a terminal that is not the same terminal as GoBus. So in terms of the things that maybe aren't listed on these slides, it's probably good to know that I would have to get from the GoBus terminal, which is the Tarta downtown terminal, to the Froggy Transportation Terminal, which is a little bit closer to the University of Toledo. So there is, some connection that would be required there. Again, $34.99. If I looked at the daily frequencies and the ones that made the most sense, I could get from Toledo to the Detroit airport in about 50 minutes at noon. So I would have about 2 hours in Toledo to get lunch, to get from one bus station to the next, and then leave from there. And then from the Detroit airport to Ann Arbor, they have another service called the Michigan Flyer. Again, it's designed for folks that are in and around Ann Arbor and other cities north and west of the airport to get them to the airport. It's an additional charge of $16. And they did have a frequency that would get me from the Detroit airport to Ann Arbor at about 2:15. So again, that gives me about an hour and a half layover at the airport in Detroit. Again, plenty of time to get from one place to another. Now, Froggy Transportation and the Michigan Flyer do share a bus terminal, so I would be kind of where I need to be to get to that next step. And then from that Ann Arbor bus station, I could make my way to the Amtrak station, which is fairly close. And the Amtrak ticket from Ann Arbor to Chicago is $40. Now, there is a bit more of a layover there. I'd be in Ann Arbor for about 4.5 hours. Plenty of time again to see some sights, maybe to get an early dinner. And then I would arrive in Chicago at 10:40 p.m. So in terms of total cost from Columbus to Chicago, about $106. The time frame, I would leave Columbus on Monday at just after 6 a.m. and I would arrive in Chicago at just before 11 p.m. And I'm going to show some maps here of some of these different, particularly the bus services. We had a statewide Zoom meeting earlier that talked about GoBus and some of the other bus options that we've got in Ohio. So this particular piece here is probably not new, but it shows the new bus routes that GoBus has introduced, including the Columbus to Toledo route that we just talked about. They also do Toledo to Cincinnati with stops in Lima and Dayton. They've got service from Columbus to Cleveland, from Columbus to Parkersburg, from Columbus to Pittsburgh. So just again, a number of different options that folks can use when they're looking at booking their buses. This is the Froggy Transportation map right off of their website. It is, obviously a Google map that they've used to show the two different stops they've got. They've got a stop in Toledo, and then they've got two stops at the Detroit airport, one at each of the terminals, and they just run back and forth between those two locations. There are no other stops on the way. And then the Michigan Flyer has those four stops from East Lansing through Ann Arbor to Detroit, and again connects those primarily for the purposes of getting folks moved to and from the Detroit airport. To return, if I were to do that using Amtrak via Toledo to kind of mirror things coming back, it actually makes more sense from a logistic and a cost standpoint to take the Lakeshore Limited east from Chicago to Toledo. I would actually leave Thursday evening, so I would kind of lose a night in the hotel, which from expense standpoint is something to consider, but also from being able to participate in things late on Thursday is also something to consider. $48 from Chicago to Toledo. I would leave at 9:30 p.m. on Thursday and I'd arrive about quarter after 3 Friday morning. And then I would take a Go bus from Toledo back to Columbus. It's about $35 total trip. I would leave at about 7:20, so there is about a 4 hour layover, and most of that in the wee hours of the morning in Toledo, and then would arrive back home shortly before 3 in Columbus. And it's been a minute since I looked up that route, but I don't believe that is a direct Toledo to Columbus. I think it is Toledo to Lima and then from Lima to Columbus. So that might explain the slightly longer trip there. So the total coming back home, if I were to just kind of come back the same way I came, $83. We'd leave Thursday evening at 9:30 and come back Friday and be there at about 2:50 p.m. So another option I mentioned was using the Lakeshore Limited. Obviously, there's a couple of different options of where I could get on that, but in the interest of exploring all of the different places, I looked at getting on the Lakeshore Limited in Cleveland. So to do that, you would go from Columbus to Akron on Go Bus. It is a $15 ticket. This is the first time that I would actually have to leave Sunday. So I would lose a day on the front end of the trip. I'd have to leave Sunday morning at 11:30 in order to be there Monday. Leave at about 11:30. I'd get to Akron at 3:15. Then there is a separate route that goes from Akron to Cleveland. It is $5. So, a fairly economical little jaunt there. It's a little bit less than an hour, and I would have about a 5 hour layover in the city of Akron. So plenty of time to explore, plenty of time to get dinner, maybe see some friends. And I would get to Cleveland shortly before 10 p.m. On Sunday. And then the Lakeshore Limited, I would take that directly from Cleveland to Chicago. I would leave Cleveland at about 4 in the morning, and then arrive in Chicago quarter after 10, a $67 ticket to go from Cleveland to Chicago. One thing I do want to flag, if you were to plan this exact trip, and if you were to go to GoBus's website and say, I want to go from Columbus to Cleveland, they will actually route you from Columbus to Athens and then from Athens to Cleveland. So I would just caution folks that if you were to plan a trip using GoBus, you may want to take a look at what would make logistical sense for yourself. And that may require you to do what I did, which is to book kind of two different legs of a trip instead of just going to their website and saying, I want to go from here to there. So just be aware of that. So the total from Columbus to Chicago, if we were to do this, would be about $87. We'd leave Sunday at just after 11:30, and we would arrive Monday morning at 10:15. So I arrive quite early on Monday. So I would get basically the whole day on Monday, but I would need to leave Sunday morning in order to make that happen. And that's just because of the time frame. Again, not to beat the drum, but as we have the Lakeshore Limited pass through Ohio, it does so at pretty dreadful times of day.
Hey, John,
Yes,
did you look at Greyhound from Columbus to Cleveland? Did I just miss it?
Brian, you
Do you know?
are about 5 slides ahead of me. So we will absolutely get to that. Um, So why not Toledo with Lakeshore Limited? If we were to use the Go Bus, the only frequency they have is the one that I talked about when I talked about going up to take the Wolverine. So there would be a significant layover. In fact, it would be almost an entire day. I would arrive in Toledo at about 10 in the morning, and I would have to wait until the next morning to take the Lakeshore Limited west out of Toledo. So it's although that's my hometown, and I'm sure I could fill in that day. In the interest of transportation, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you just have to sit there for so long. Why not the Floridian? I have some genuine concerns about timely service given the length of that route now. To do the trip from Alliance or even Cleveland or even Toledo via the Floridian, I just have some concerns that um, I would be waiting in a station for a train that is, late. Now it's gotten a lot better, but there have been days where it is substantially late, and the Lakeshore is able to hold at least a little closer to that schedule. And then why not the Cardinal? It's unfortunate, but that Cardinal only runs 3 days a week. And unfortunately, those 3 days did not align with my trip. So, much like I think many people that would use the Cardinal have found is it just didn't work for what I'm trying to do with this trip. So, returning via Cleveland is basically the same thing but backwards. We take the lakeshore from Chicago to Cleveland. It's actually the same lakeshore that I would take if I were to go back through Toledo. The price is the same as the westbound leg. It's $67. I would leave the same time, 9:30 p.m. on Thursday, but I would arrive in Cleveland at shortly before 6 Friday morning. And then I would take the Go Bus from Cleveland to Columbus via Akron again, 35 total dollars, 11:55 in the AM to 7:50 in the PM. So I would basically be in transit for almost an entire day to get home just before 8 o'clock on Friday. Total to return, $102. Again, the timeline would be Thursday at 9:30 p.m. to Friday at 7:50 p.m. So here we go, Brian. Let's talk Greyhound. They make it very easy. In fact, it is essentially, I would say, equivalent in terms of ease of use to flying. I would take Greyhound Flixbus from Columbus to Chicago. It's about $45. That outbound timeline, I would leave Monday morning at 9:45 and get back at 4:15. So again, it's a single day's trip. Compared to driving, it's about an hour and a half longer, so it's very comparable to that drive time. And it is by far the most economical way to get from Columbus to Chicago. The return trip is roughly the same. Timeline is exactly the same. It'd be 11:30 to 7:50, so about that 7.5 hours. It is just a couple of bucks more expensive to come back than it is to go out, $51 versus 45. But again, it's very comparable to driving, and in fact would be cheaper than driving with current gas prices. And for those that aren't familiar with the Greyhound network, they have a multitude of stops between Greyhound proper and the Greyhound Flixbus service from Chicago to Columbus. Both of those carriers run. The tickets that I looked at are actually Flixbus service over Greyhound, but you book it all through the same website. So let's look at a quick comparison here. I know I just went through a whole ton of information, but it might be good to look at everything, kind of on a single set of slides here. So flying again, we'd be $288. It's about 4 hours out and 4 hours back. And in that time, I accounted not only flight time, but also arriving at the airport early and allowing myself some time um, to get my luggage and get myself situated when the plane lands. Driving, again, about $120, but that's just cost of fuel. I'm sure there's plenty of other expenses that would be related to driving, and about 6 hours each direction. To take the Wolverine out of Toledo would be, if I were to do a complete round trip, as I had described, it'd be just under $200. It'd be 17 hours out and 18 hours back. So again, we're starting to see pretty substantial increases in total travel time, but that isn't, again, the fault of the transit and transportation agencies. It just has a lot to do with the amount of time that's spent laying over in various locations waiting for that next leg of the trip. Lakeshore through Cleveland would be roughly the same price. It will take 24 hours to go out, 21 hours to go back. The reason that there's those difference in prices, obviously train speed is a big chunk of it, but also, to go to Toledo is just as the bird flies, a substantially shorter trip than through Cleveland. And then finally, the Greyhound Flixbus, just under $100 round trip, 7.5 hours each way. So again, I think in terms of comparison, that one makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. So what did I book for August? I know you folks have been waiting very patiently to get to this point. So the outbound trip, I decided to take the Lakeshore. I'm going to take the Go Bus to Cleveland via Akron, and then I'll take the Lakeshore to Chicago. Um, Obviously, and I think just to kind of put a bow on it, and then I'll come back to this, the return trip, I am taking the Greyhound because that is the cheapest, most convenient way, other than flying to get there. So part of the reason I chose to do the extended trip via Cleveland is to be able to really test the various different providers, the various different modes of transportation. I wanted to be able to try Go Bus, which is something I've yet to do. With us being all aboard Ohio, I thought it was important that a portion of the trip include Amtrak service so that I can comment very candidly on, the goods, the bads, and the uglies of using that. And I am not, I do have some flexibility in terms of the timing of my trip. So I am able to spend that extra time making the trip from Columbus to Cleveland and then from Cleveland to Chicago. On the return trip, again, in terms of cost and time, Greyhound just makes all the sense in the world. If you don't need to absolutely be there in an incredibly short period of time, I would almost plan on using Greyhound anyway, because yes, it's maybe an hour to an hour and a half longer than driving would be, but I don't have to drive. So it's not a wasted 5, 6 hour time behind the wheel. It's something that I can do in the comfort of a bus, having the opportunity to sit back and enjoy myself in a more meaningful way, which is what we always talk about when we talk about the benefits of public transit. So the total price for this round trip, about $150. Again, I'll be 24 hours out, which I am aware of and I am okay with. Again, my travel plans allow me the flexibility to do that. And then the return timeline, just 7.5 hours coming back Friday morning. So what's next? This trip will be in August. I will leave Sunday, August the 23rd. That'll be my the beginning of my Go Bus to Amtrak trip. I will return Friday, August 28th. So be sure to follow us on socials while that's happening. That Monday, that Sunday and Monday, you'll see all of my updates taking the trip. And then that Friday, you'll see the updates of the Greyhound trip coming back. And then the September statewide Zoom meeting will be part two of this. I'll do a summary of, all the different legs of the trip. And then I'll give you guys, again, some frank reviews of the providers. We'll give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that if you're planning a similar trip, you'll be able to say, okay, this is, something I'd be interested in doing. So that's it. I'm going to go through just a couple of things real quick, and then I'll open the floor up for questions about anything that we've discussed today. The first piece that I wanted to talk about, we've got a couple of legislative updates. One is at the federal level, one is at the state level. The first is at the federal level, the Build America 250 Act is kind of moving around right now. This is the Transportation Reauthorization Act. This will renew or replace funding that came from the IIJA back in 2021. We've reached the time where those dollars will expire at the end of this year. So this Reauthorization Act, again, kind of re-ups those dollars going forward for the next 5 years. What's important to us, it will fund the continuation of the Corridor ID program and of the long distance program. Where this bill is at right now, it has passed the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. It did that about 3 weeks ago. There were a number of amendments that were included. I would say, we are certainly going to defer to our federal partners, primarily the Rail Passengers Association, who are doing the work in Washington, D.C. on this particular bill. But I would also give everybody, kind of the grounding that we are a very, very, very long way away from this being signed into law. And in fact, it may not even pass during this Congress. We are hearing some pretty credible rumblings that they will pass some kind of continuing resolution to buy themselves into the next Congress and just kind of pick it back up then. So if there's good things in it, great. If there's bad things in it, don't worry too badly because again, I think there's going to be plenty of time to work on this, and it may not even be something that we worry about this Congress. The next piece, which is a state level announcement for those that haven't seen, Senate Bill 449 was introduced 2 weeks ago. This would be the language that would allow Ohio to rejoin MIPRIC, which is something that we've advocated for the past few years. Just to give you kind of the nuts and bolts of this bill, this is the language only. It doesn't have an appropriation, so there's no money in it to pay for the fees that would be required to rejoin MIPRIC. It is just the kind of the framework that would allow us to appoint commissioners. Our goal is to have meaningful committee activity, to have MIPRIC come in and testify on their own behalf to answer questions that the senators may have, the legislators may have about MIPRIC and the benefits of joining, and then potentially also have other partners like Amtrak come in and speak to why this is important. It is a bipartisan bill. It's sponsored by Senator George Lang, who's a Republican from the Cincinnati area, and Nikki Antonio, who is a Democrat from the Cleveland area. What makes that so important, obviously, aside from it being bipartisan, Senator Lang, his district includes the city of Hamilton, which have been great partners of ours and really represent the potential for Amtrak service in a smaller market than really gets talked about. Senator Antonio, obviously Cleveland area, which stands to really see a lot of benefit from Amtrak service expansion, but also Senator Antonio is the ranking member on the Transportation Committee, which is where this bill has been assigned. So we'll have kind of an insider in the room helping to make sure that we're able to get committee activity on this. Again, the status, it has been assigned to the Senate Transportation Committee. The legislature had their final meeting of the spring on Wednesday. It is incredibly unlikely that this will have any type of meaningful activity before lame duck in November. So we won't have a whole lot of updates on this. We won't have a whole lot of requests or advocacy push on this for the next few months, again, until the legislature comes back in November for lame duck session. Rail Nation is coming very, very soon. It is that first weekend in October. We are so delighted to be the location that was chosen by RPA. Toledo will be hosting Rail Nation this year. They have extended their discount for AAO members, which should have expired the end of May. They've extended it till June 21st at midnight. So if you have not registered for Rail Nation and you would like to, it is a substantial 50% discount. Normal tickets are $199. This discount gets it down to $99. Use the code RNAAO at checkout anytime before June 21st at 11:59 p.m. That's the last slide I have. Brian, I know you had an announcement that you wanted to make, and then we will open the floor for questions. Brian, while you're talking, I'm going to dig through the 54 different messages that I have missed while I've been talking.
Sure. So just want everybody to know this Brian Schreiber, Northeast chapter. We have a field trip scheduled for Saturday, July 11th that I think will be interesting to folks from all parts of the state. We're going to go to the Trolley Museum, the Northern Ohio Railway Museum, I think is the full name of that, in Seville, Ohio. That's southwestern Medina County. So it's about an hour from Cleveland, but it's really only an hour and a half from Columbus if somebody wanted to come up from that direction. Not too far from Akron or Canton either. So it is an opportunity. There won't be a meeting. This will just be, hey, we're going to ride the trolleys. You pay there. There's a nominal fee, but they actually do allow you to ride the trolleys. They have some track sections. So they have older interurbans and streetcars and previous trains from the Cleveland transit system. So it's a fun little way to see some of the history. So hopefully some other people will want to join us on Saturday, July 11th. It'll be in the early afternoon, so you can listen into the statewide meeting in the morning and then head towards Medina County.
Wonderful.
So, John, if you're ready with me next. And then the other things, I'll ask you a question, John. What I was asking was not so much Greyhound between Columbus and Chicago, but the idea of taking Greyhound to either Cleveland or Toledo to catch the lakeshore limit. That's kind of what I was getting at there.
Absolutely. So I did look at that, and I'm sorry that I didn't include that in the slides. We ran into a kind of a confluence of price versus timing, which
Mhm.
mirrored a lot of the same concerns we had with, like, taking, for example, Go Bus to Toledo and then Amtrak West. The timing of everything just didn't work out very well to link those two sections or legs of the trip together. And areas where Go Bus service operates, it is cheaper than Greyhound. So if you
Yeah.
do have the opportunity to use it, it is more economical. Now, again, your mileage may vary from where you're going to where you're going. Greyhound may be a better opportunity in terms of timing. But for this particular trip, in basically in both of those directions, the Go Bus slash Go Bus Froggy Transportation, Michigan Flyer Service were the ones that lined up best to get me on a train at the time that I wanted
Mhm.
to be on a train.
Yeah, and then just I think some comments for the whole group. Like when we look at how difficult it is today to do these things from Columbus, it puts in perspective. I mean, as difficult as it is from Cleveland or Toledo, we do have better options. I mean, the train from Cleveland or Toledo to Chicago is drive time competitive, is quite a bit less expensive when you look at the full cost of driving. I mean, for John, 711 miles round trip from Columbus, that's the IRS mileage rate this year, I believe, is 75 cents a mile. So that's like $500
Yeah.
if you're driving. I mean, so that's substantially more expensive even than flying. Not to mention that you're going to be paying $50 to $75 a day to park that vehicle. Um, So I think that helps put it in perspective that at least we have that option. And then probably the other thing, some of the chat that's been going back and forth, John, I can address, people talking about GoBus and different options there. I think one of the things to keep in mind with GoBus is a subsidized by the state of Ohio transportation system, and it was set up to not compete with private, so in other words, Greyhound. So some of what you would expect to be the most used routes are not covered by GoBus because they are covered by Greyhound. That's why you get funky things like Columbus to Cleveland connecting via Athens or Akron. And so, just having a multimodal does not address the schedule challenges of GoBus. You would actually need changes in, legislative guidance about how to do that and say, hey, like another example would be Amtrak connector through buses. They can't sell tickets on that unless you're getting on a train. That's kind of silly. If Amtrak's running the bus already and somebody only wants to go on the bus part, they should be able to do that. But that would require, at least as far as I know, change in federal law.
Yeah, I
So
think that's right. I think that's right. And yeah, and it's, as I reflected on how to get out and how to get back, if I were planning this trip solely for me to get there and back, and I was paying for it out of my own pocket, I would take Greyhound in both directions, just straight there, because it's the best combination of price versus time versus convenience. I mean, if I were not paying for it, I would fly. And, I think that's a reality that many people live in where it's, the flight is incredibly convenient. It is the least amount of time. Although it's not as short as I think a lot of people say, oh, it's only an hour and a half flight. Well, yeah, it might be, but you've got to get there an hour and a half early and you've got to, figure out how to get from the airport to wherever. So, I mean, it's not perfect either. But when I booked everything out and included that Cleveland leg, I really wanted to be able to speak in September to all of the different modes, to talk about the experience on GoBus, to talk about the experience on Amtrak, and then to talk about the experience on Greyhound. So uh, we are doing this very much for you folks so that you can follow up in September and learn a lot about this experience. So Glenn, I see your hand up. You've been waiting patiently.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hey, listen, I seen that Alfeka Mutardi and Stu Rosenblatt and all are here from the National Infrastructure Bank, and I would kind of like to ask them what their take is on the Build 250 legislation.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I would say the only ask that I would have of those two is to maybe frame their comments specific to passenger rail or to public transit, because there's a whole lot in that bill and there's a whole lot not in that bill that we could talk about. This is infrastructure funding for the next half a decade. So happy to have them weigh in, but kind of keep their comments limited to what would be germane to our group.
I, I have a question next.
Somebody's got a question. What? Can you hear us? Hello?
Yeah,
yes, we can hear you, NIB Coalition. Alex,
Yes.
please let NIB Coalition speak first.
Good. All right. So Stu Rosenblatt, I wanted to thank Glenn for inviting us. And, of course, we've talked, to many of your folks. We work with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. We'll keep our remarks to what you indicated, which concerns the funding aspects in the new How Not to Build 250 Act, which is hopefully not making its way through Congress. We like some of it. I know you guys like some of it, but overall, it stinks. So I'm going to ask Alfeka Mutardi, who's a economist, to take 3 minutes. Alfeka, just briefly go through the what's really been cut in this bill from the IIJA. And then I know Angela wants to make a few comments, and then we'll go from there. We won't take long, though. Go ahead, Alfeka.
Okay, great. I can show you a slide if you want to drop your slides, and I've sent in a request for just to show you the numbers on this bill. But yeah, thank you. Let me see if I can pull up the slide. I'll just show you, yes, the what the NIB is doing versus what is in the Build Act. Because I think this is pertinent. We have a bill in Congress to create a $5 trillion public bank to lend for infrastructure all across the country. The size of this bank is set by the American Society of Civil Engineers, who's looking at all the different infrastructure categories and saying we need this much, this much, this much, that is not being covered by either federal money, state and local money, private money. And this bank would make up the difference. And in particular, it would cover transportation systems, the power grid to electrify those transportation systems, and specifically high-speed rail as well. So let's look at this Build America Act. This is our reading on it. It's coming in. It's a 5-year appropriations for infrastructure, for mostly transportation. It's now being discussed and has been passed by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee at $580 billion over 5 years. And that's a big cut from what the previous bill was. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the IIJA, has 2 different names. That one was $1.2 trillion. So this funding under these 5-year programs has now been cut in half. And the biggest cuts have gone to passenger rail. This is our reading on the passenger rail line. It's gone from $169 billion over 5 years under IIJA to $64 billion under this new Build Act. A big, big, big cut. We agree that the passenger rail folks should try and lobby for increasing this amount, get as much as they can. Federal grant money is always preferable to anything. However, we're going to need big bucks to really reorganize the passenger rail system in the United States, get these transit times that you were discussing in your proposed travel plans around the Ohio area down a little bit, get the trains to move faster, the scheduling to be better integrated.
All right. Let me just say something really brief. Yeah. We don't have that much time. The important thing about the passenger rail component and the high-speed rail component is there is zero guaranteed money.
Yeah.
Under IIJA, there was $66 billion guaranteed for Amtrak. In the new bill, there is zero, which means that people who support passenger rail are going to have to go to committees in Congress to lobby for money. There's an excellent article by Jim Matthews of the Rail Passenger Association, which we can send you, excoriating this bill and saying that whenever rail people have to go to Congress, they usually get about 20 to 25% of what they ask for. And because this is grant money and subject to President Trump, you don't even know how much you're going to get. And then finally on high-speed rail, zero. So don't even go to ask. So I'll leave it at that. Angela wants to say something, and then we'll go from there.
Just quickly, Angela Volo, Communications Director for this Coalition for the National Infrastructure Bank. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, John. I wanted to just add that people should know that there is tremendous momentum right now in the country to change the direction that we're going, and the future of the nation and passenger rail and high-speed rail is integral to this. We're proposing that we move forward with an off-budget bank that's been done before. In fact, this is how Lincoln built the transcontinental rail. But the momentum now in the country is really significant, that we've got 62 members of Congress on the bill. The National Association of Counties passed a resolution in support, and last week in the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So we look at this moment right now for change. We can do it. if we don't say, well, let's kick the can down the road. So we think that this is a big moment for change and to move the country forward,
Right.
and your institution is integral to
And
that.
by the way, we do have 3 Ohio members on the bill, Marcy Kaptur, Chantel Brown, and Greg Landsman, and we're going for more. So why don't we
Wonderful.
leave it at that?
Well, thank you so much for your update and your thoughts on the Build America 250 Act. Again, we are in the very, very earliest of stages when it comes to that bill and its work across the floor. I saw a comment in the chat about, the statutory deadline being later this fall. That is absolutely correct. What I am hearing is that they will, again, have a continuing resolution just to hold current funding to get us through into the next Congress. I don't think there's really a whole lot of appetite to entertain this all the way across the finish line right now. So, Jess, you've been waiting very patiently with your hand up.
From what I've understood, and I know it's rail. I know you mentioned Rail Passengers Association and High Speed Rail, and now it sounds like the National Infrastructure Bank people are closer to the federal level. But I also saw from them, I think High Speed Rail Association especially, there's also a third bill of transportation, housing, and urban development that's kind of like their annual appropriations bill. So those two sort of interact. That's on the one hand, that's where they would actually appropriate the money that is authorized in Build or IAJA. But how is that when you say that they're going to do a continuing resolution, and the Build 250 won't go through anytime soon? But how does the third, are you talking about appropriations in general, or those are going to get passed, but it won't affect that would just kind of be the current Amtrak funding, or?
Yeah, so I mean, those two things kind of fall into different buckets, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because our focus at All Aboard Ohio is more on our state level piece, and I'm very aware that, there is a federal component to that, but that's what our friends at, to your point, RPA and High Speed Rail Association are focused on. The Reauthorization Act or the Build America 250 Act, whichever terminology you'd like to use, that extends out long-term capital funding over a 5-year window, whereas the THUD that you're talking about is operational funding in the near term. So they both have pieces that are important to passenger rail advocacy in those groups, but they kind of are different chunks of the same pie. So again, I know everybody's very interested in that, but it is something that is probably beyond the scope of our advocacy effort. And I would defer to, again, our federal partners to be the ones to answer and lead that charge.
So I guess I'm saying the third bill getting passed with not a lot of funding isn't the end of it. If they do a continuing resolution on a IAJA or Build or whatever, then the third bill doesn't really
I mean, again, for both of those, I would defer to our federal partners. We're really not equipped to answer that here. But I mean, each of those operate in a very different way. So, Jason, I see you've got your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Quick question about Rail Nation October. Do we know?
Oh, no.
Jason, I'm sorry, I accidentally muted you. That was my fault.
Oh, yeah. Do we know about Rail Nation Ballpark when it starts on Friday and ends on Sunday?
I believe they've got a skeleton agenda that's been posted on the RPA website.
Oh,
While I'm going to try and rub my belly and pat my head at the same time. See if I can find that in there.
yeah. And I'll try to do both and say I don't normally advocate flying, but consider if you have to fly to Chicago, if you do Southwest to Midway from any of the 3 C cities in Ohio, then you've got a shorter, cheaper L ride into the city itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I could never fly into Chicago O'Hare Airport ever again,
Yeah.
I would sign that contract right now. It is
But I'll tell you, Jason, I did just price out both Southwest and United. United was less expensive for the trip I have coming up. And Southwest
Yes.
flight policies have changed as well.
Yes, I
Oh
have.
yeah, exactly. The bags and all that would have been a factor
Mhm.
before, but not now.
They would.
Jason, I'm looking at the agenda for Rail Nation, and
Mhm.
again, it's just a skeleton at this point. They've got events listed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which is October 2nd through 4th. But they don't have times associated with them yet. So I think I can feel pretty confident in saying we're going to have a full day Saturday, probably afternoon and evening events on Friday, and probably a morning event, because one of the last things that's listed on the Sunday agenda is brunch. So I would think they would be wrapping up pretty early in the day on Sunday.
Hey, thank you.
Of course. Appreciate the question. All right, wonderful. NIB Coalition, I see your hands up again.
Just a quick thing, just to let people know, I know we're circulating, and I know Glenn is helping on this, a letter which will ultimately go to RPA on the Build Act. It will also include high-speed rail, the bill that was introduced by Seth Moulton. It'll include the NIB bill that's in the Congress now, and would be good if All Aboard Ohio wanted to add their name on that. We're encouraging Rail Passengers Association to really, up the ante. I think what they're doing is good, but it's gonna have to go to the next level. So I would just want to let people. Maybe Glenn wants to speak to that. I don't know, but I want to let you know.
Yeah, I would say just in very broad strokes, anything, and this would go for any organization that's interested in having us participate in a letter of support. Just reach out to Mitch and I, and we can take it to the board. And if it's something that aligns with our mission, we've always been very supportive of those types of things. So
Great.
Yeah, I just said that, I'll just say that we've circulated that letter looking to touch base. What we wanted, what our mission was we were going to wind up getting all the players within here and then push it up to Jim Matthews, who can then push it up as a kind of a co-organization level type ask to take our federal partners on the shoulder and say, hey, this is what we're for. So
wonderful. We're at time. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I feel like there may still be some questions, and I think anybody that wants to stay and dig through some more of those questions, but I think, again, I'll stop the recording, and folks that are wanting to enjoy the rest of their Saturday, please feel free.